My name is Davis Wardwell. I'm 18
My
years
name's
old.
Lisa
My name is
Hannon.
Noah Blunt. I'm the student pastor here
Tree
at Northside.
I'm actually Charlie's cousin.
David Thomas, here with Charlie.
Austin Gregory. Thank you for having
My
me.
name is Donovan
My name is
Jones.
Micah Aver. I'm a student at Landon High
All
School.
right. Well, Mr. Charlie, you're going to lead us out here tonight on your Young Minds podcast.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, and I'm so glad to do this next episode. It's a special one for sure. Just wanted to let you know about something. We had a little change in guest. So Randy Mullinax was supposed to be on, but that changed. So Landon gladly stepped to the plate, and he's got questions for me because this is for my 3-year of salvation anniversary episode. So Landon, it's great to have you back on.
Absolutely, it's good to be here.
Yeah, man.
I hope you're ready for flipping the script.
I don't
today.
know if I am or not. We'll see. We will see if I'm ready for it. I've had it once or twice, but you went deep. So I'm really excited to see what you got. So take it away.
Absolutely. So let me just hear just about your testimony. So you said 3 years you've been saved.
Yeah.
So what's your testimony?
Yeah.
Capitalize on that moment.
Sure.
3 years ago.
So I plan to do like a more in-depth video, like a video type format, for the whole thing. So I'll kind of keep it brief a little bit, but I'll definitely tell you. So for my testimony wise, when I was born, I had like a plethora of medical problems. I can't even name half of them because there are all these different names and whatnot, and what was so wild about it is that, so I had all these things going on, right? And the likelihood of me living was slim. Like, I was born and I was 2 pounds and 13 ounces when I was born. I was really tiny. Not anymore, as you can see, but that's just the start of how God was, there when I was born. If you looked at my charts and you looked at, how I was behaving, you'd be like, is this another kid? Did you swap his charts out? I mean, it's only God right there, that we can say that, that I was going to be all right. There's no, and my mom, I'll tell you right now, don't ever doubt the faith of a mom about her kid, all right, whether they're being born, because my mom was like, he's coming home. Like, she fought that, and I'm so glad she did. Just being honest, you see a lot of parents, they hear that news, and they're like, well, okay, well, how can we make them comfortable? What's the next step, right? So I'm thankful that she fought for me. My dad did too. They both did, but that's just the medical side of it. And I would name off more of the medical mumbo jumbo, but it's a lot,
Sure.
Now, the main thing I do have is a mild case of cerebral palsy. And I've, people may ask, well, God healed you from all that other stuff. I didn't heal you the whole way, right? Well, it's because I can use that. God's allowed me to use that in a lot of ways.
Good.
To share, and it's a part of my testimony, and some people are like, oh my gosh, I've got a boring testimony. Well, I don't, I've got a really crazy one. And it's fun to share it, but then, flash forward, I just kept after all the medical stuff growing up and all. I never really grew up in church or anything. I just, and it wasn't that I was cynical towards it or anything like that. We just got caught up in life and just didn't go. And my mom she would tell me, she's like, well, if you want to go, I'll take you. But she never made me, which partly, you say that, yes, you want, as an early age, you want to take your kids to church and all, but at the same time, I was old enough to go but I don't want to be here. I was kind of at that point, so I'm honestly thankful that she didn't force me to go, and I went on my own accord.
Okay.
I had friends invite me. So then I think it was at 16, 15, went to FCA because Baines, Blank, and Stephen, Peterson, they invited me, and I went, loved it. And I think honestly that I've always wanted a relationship with God. I just didn't know where to go and where to start, because with me not growing up in church, how was I supposed to know? Where was I supposed to go? And so, and then I went, and so it's coming up, of course. I went to, Good Friday service because Baines invited me. And Northside's always been a part of my family's history, I guess. Both my grandmas went here. And then, this was the church we'd always go to for Easter and Christmases, things like that. So we've seen it change a pretty good bit. In fact, there's even some pictures of me at the Fall Festival in 2008.
Okay.
And I'm like, dang, the Family Life Center's not changed at all. Because the same exact tables and the same exact sign up in the, so not much has changed. And the only thing that's changed is my height because I was in like a little monkey suit that, my parents decided to take me in. But so Northside's always been a big part of my, I guess my family, and I just didn't know it until it was on April 17th, which is when the episode will come out. That was Easter that day, and I got saved then.
Wow.
And my mom rededicated her life to it. It was partly
Wow.
she needed to, and also she didn't want me to be alone. There's a part of that too, like going up and doing it by myself, But she knew she needed to. You know? And so, she rededicates herself. I go up there, get saved for the first time.
That's amazing.
And Gary Woods, I'm so thankful that I got to spend as much time with him as I did. And I can't wait to see him again in heaven. But he led us in that prayer,
Amen.
and we got saved. And then the next week, I got baptized by the great Randy Mullinax. I was and I always love to say this just because it's crazy to think. He'd only been his story. A part of for me is he'd only been at Northside for a few months, and I was the first person he baptized here. Yeah, and so that's a really cool thing.
That's awesome.
Say. And people are like, we've heard you say that. Stop saying it. But it's really, really neat. Just to say that. I guess somebody that's like way younger than him, I was the first person he baptized. Yeah. And of course, Mom followed suit. Right behind me, and that was such a unique experience. And I know that some people it's great whatever age you get baptized at. But I'm so thankful that I was baptized at the age I was because I've got video of it and I can remember it. If you're so young and you get baptized or saved or whatever, you don't really remember it unless there's a photo or video or something. But I've got that ingrained in my brain, man. Yeah, that's there. Yeah. But ever since then, God's been working through me ever since. Yeah. I know that's on some more of the other questions. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. So just a little bit deeper, just into your testimony. So what are some things that have changed since you've been saved?
That's good. Definitely become more aware of maybe some of the stuff that I was doing that was wrong. You don't know, what's a sin and what's not until you keep learning. Yeah. Right. And I would say in terms of when I grew up, I had the Christian values, I guess, not cursing, all this stuff, but never, I just kind of, it was it's our parents' rules, whatever, and didn't think much of it. But there's a lot of things that, God's taught me and shown me that, I might have been wrong on and wrong about. Because he humbles me every day and shows me how wrong I am. But that's for sure that's changed. And also, just some relationships have changed too. And there's also just, we've talked about this a ton, in my family, there's a lot more, especially on my mom's side. Because I've got a cousin that's a missionary in Honduras. Okay. And this has brought us closer, so much closer than what it could have been otherwise. And we were close as it is, but actually I say that we didn't really see each other that much, but now we're talking a pretty good bit, and we keep up with each other, and so that's another thing that's really neat is it strengthens relationships, at least for me. Yeah. And now just praying for those family members that aren't saved, because everybody has them, but. And we're praying that we all can be in heaven one day together. That's one thing that I'm sure it's definitely changed is, the things that God has shown me that I was doing that was wrong, and also just relationships, good or bad way. Because some I've had to step away from because they just weren't godly. And you can talk to them all you want, but sometimes for the betterment of your faith and yourself, you have to step away from them. Yeah. Not that you're not praying for them, but you've got to step away from those. Yeah. So
sure.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, so let's kind of continue on just on that train of thought. Yeah. So how have you grown just in your walk with Christ since you've been saved?
Ooh, one thing I would definitely say, and sometimes I don't know, why God's given me this want to do this, but sometimes I think, maybe it's with the podcast and stuff. I feel I can give somewhat decent advice to people, if they're needing something. I will say this, a lot of people, they do come to talk to me about things that they wouldn't otherwise talk to others about, which I appreciate that, that you can come to me in that way. Now I will say sometimes when they do that, it's a lot to take in sometimes, because what they're telling you, and I really feel for our counselor Dave, here at Northside, because he's taking all that in, and you got to pray on that and pray for those people. That's definitely something that God's allowed me to, grow in for sure. And that's really a unique thing, especially with me moving out of the youth and into the college ministry. I still talk to a lot of the youth, but now I can kind of be more, not really a mentor, but just kind of somebody they can ask questions or whatever. And to pray for them, and still being their friend as well. But it's definitely a different dynamic too, since I'm a bit older, and so that's been really unique for sure.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So Jesus says this in Matthew 28:18-20.
Yep.
It says, Jesus came near and said to them, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. So this is the Great Commission.
Right.
This is Jesus' mission
for
the church. So let me just ask you, why is it important just to be on mission with God?
Man, I mean, just to give our example, what we went to, outreach the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how important, and also I love that, by the way. Definitely want to do that again with you. And how impactful that was. Just to go out and share His word, right? I mean, because we don't know who all saved. I mean, most of the people that we ran into, they had a relationship, and especially that one guy at the end, he really was passionate. But that's what our goal is to make heaven crowded, right? And we want to see more and more people, saved.
Yeah.
And that's what God calls us to do. That's what we're put on this earth to do.
Yeah.
Is to make heaven crowded. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how are you walking in obedience to the Great Commission?
That's good. Well, I would say for one thing, this podcast is a big part of it. Now, do I perfectly, fulfill that every day? Probably not. And I want to continue to get better at that, especially in every episode, either putting prayer in it or, sharing the gospel in it. Because I mean, sure, people can tell their stories and things, but where's the gospel in that? Because sometimes they may not directly outright just say it or say the verses or whatever. And sometimes you have to outright directly say what the gospel is. Because I mean, somebody that is maybe listening to this podcast, they have no idea what that is.
Sure.
So there's definitely areas I can grow in that. But I would say definitely the podcast for sure has allowed me to grow. And like I said, just talking with people, that is so fun, dude. I have a blast doing that. And that's just a blessing to have for sure,
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that you're saved, baptized here at Northside, so you became a member then.
Yep.
So how has being a member at Northside, which it's very interconnected, your salvation and being a member here,
right?
But how has that impacted your walk with Christ?
Oh, man, that's a great question. Especially. It's impacted me in such a big way, just because of me getting to serve in a lot of ways. Just to use you as an example, you let me do those cards for you, which I love doing that, by the way. That was really fun, and knowing that I'm getting to help in some sort of way to fulfill the Great Commission for you guys when you go out on mission at the mall is really, really cool. Just play a small role in that. So serving's been a big part, especially because I'm in the choir, help Miss Judy, help you, help whoever I can. And I'm not saying that to brag in any way, sense of the word, but it's really, really cool and I'm glad that Northside's such a church that allows people to serve like they do. Because not all churches like that. I've heard a friend of mine, he was telling me about how and this is on the serving aspect, but I just thought it was a little strange. They said that their church, they wouldn't let the kids sit on normal services. They had it was like youth. They weren't sitting on normal services. They were separate, how you would say preschool and all were. And I'm like, by that point, youth need to see how normal services are run and as a congregation, And so, that's another thing that I'm thankful for is that, for the most part, we're not separate. We do things a lot together. And, by no means is Northside a perfect church. There's still things that, I've seen that we need to work on, like we've talked about, getting our stuff out, communicating a bit more about communication. And we're working on that, And as long as we're praying for that and working towards it, and we're not being lazy about it, that's part of it. Is that people, they and that's another thing too. Is that when you go to a church, just know that there's going to be a lot of things. Say if you show up on a Sunday, there's stuff that was done and somebody did it. All right, regardless, I don't know who did it. All right, but somebody did whatever that was done. So think about that. Yeah.
There's a lot behind the scenes, right?
There was a ton behind the scenes that you don't realize, from printing out papers to making sure the greeters in their positions. There's a lot. And Northside's I bet say a pretty big church for our area. There's even bigger churches like Sherwood, for example. It's huge. But it's all the same principle. You've got to make sure that You know, that when you come here, there's people that have done those things.
Mhm.
And to be thankful for that. You know,
Yeah.
I would say for sure. Yeah.
Good. So going back just a little bit, so you've been saved for 3 years now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What kind of legacy do you want to leave, especially for those, right,
Man.
for those generations behind you?
That's
As
good.
you think about your whole life, right, what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
Well, I mean, this probably might sound like the cliche one, but a godly one, you know, for one. I mean,
Okay.
you know, and but also one that knew that I struggled, but you know, I didn't let that, you know, that God was with me the whole time. You know, 'cause the thing about it is, we're going to struggle, right?
Mhm.
Like, you don't want to, you know, especially with this, something like this, you don't want to portray that everything's just like sunshine and rainbows all the time. Because, and especially in a Christian's life, it's not, you know, but it's so worth it, though. And that's what I want to preface is that it's so worth it to follow Jesus, though. Like, it may not, you know, always be like, I won't say what it is, but Landon knows, you know, I'm going through some trials right now in my family, right? But it's still so worth it to follow Jesus, though. You know, just because that's going on, He's going to bring us all out of that, you know, eventually. Don't know when that'll be, but He will. And, you know, I would say that's the kind of legacy I want to leave behind, especially, you know, and also one that my kids can look at and be not ashamed of, to be a part of that family. And, you know, because, I mean, there's plenty of people that their kids look at that and I'm like, man, I wish I was not a part of that. You know, that's what my family's known for. I don't want that, you know, at all. You know, and so I would definitely say, you know, obviously a godly legacy, but also one that realizes that they're not perfect either. And for others to realize that either. Because you know, we're not good people, all right? You know, but, you know, God saved us from that. And you can be forgiven as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, kind of switching gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Just thinking about our generations. So, your generation is Gen Z.
Yep.
Okay. So, how do you think your generation is doing at following Jesus?
Oh. I'd say it's about 50-50.
Okay.
Reason being is because, like, so like if you go out to the colleges and then you go out to, you know, and then you see things online, I mean, Gen Z's hungry for the word. I mean, it's insane from what I've seen, you know. But also at the same time, you go to some public schools and some of the colleges and other areas, and it's like, oh man, like they need Jesus bad, you know. Like not casting judgment on them, but they do. It's you know, because everybody does. You know, so I think it's really about a 50-50 thing because I mean, a lot of people, you know, young people are stepping up. Like, you know, one example I like to use is Bryce Crawford. He's Gen Z, and he speaks to campuses with hundreds, if not thousands, of kids surrounding him. You know, around my age group. And Baines has gotten to see him. You know, and that's encouraging to see. You know, and it's really really cool. So I would say there's obviously things that because and this is for every generation. You know, there's things that we always have to work on, but we're not doing terrible either. Like so, there's like a medium right there.
Yeah.
And sure, we could always be doing better and chasing God more. You know, now I will say this, that the people that don't follow God, they seem to be a lot louder sometimes. You know, they're always like screaming in your ear. You know, but God's not going to scream and He's going to whisper in your ear. And we have to follow Him and know that, you know, with this generation, we have to pray for our generation too. You know, because we're going to be the ones that step up and lead, and we're already doing it. So we have to make sure that we're ready for that too. Yeah.
Well, good. So just kind of digging a little bit deeper into this. So what do you think your generation needs in order to be better at following Jesus?
Oh, that's good. Man, I would say more, you know, more of just, well, I don't know how to put this, but like less anger. Like, you know, a lot, because I mean, I think my generation comes at, if they're confronted, their immediate reaction is to get angry. And, you know, you see that in a lot of videos and things. Like, I've watched some, you know, stuff off college campuses, and I'm like, why are we so angry? Like, we're the guy you're talking to is just trying to have a conversation, you know? So definitely that's one of them. Because I think my generation's we're really emotional, you know? We don't know how to control our emotions a pretty good bit. And, you know, that can be a good thing or a bad thing, just depending on what the situation is. But I would definitely say, you know, if somebody's trying to talk to you, especially about Jesus, hear them out. You know, I mean, they're just trying to help you understand. They're not trying to, I mean, for the most part. I mean, some people want to be hostile, but I would say for the most part, if they're coming on campus, they care. You know, they care about and want to see you saved. They don't want to, But yes, they will argue back because they're fighting for their Savior and they don't want him to be misrepresented. But they're only arguing because you're arguing right back. So, and being hostile. So definitely I would say, let's control the anger a little bit because I see so many videos, like I said, of people just being, hateful and angry. It's like, they're there not to, they're there to share the gospel with you. Just hear them out. And even if, it's not for you, just be cordial. Like I know that, you said that you had a girl that you talked to, at Outreach. You guys were nice about it. And she may not have, you planted a seed though. She may not have, I don't know, it may not have clicked or whatever, but she was nice about it. And that's the point is that, we need to be more, nicer to one another for one thing.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be able to get anywhere and spreading the gospel if we're at each other's throats. Right. So.
Yeah. Good. So, my generation, the millennials.
Yeah, the millennials.
How can my generation help your generation be better at following Jesus?
Well, and you do a great job of it, but I would say being mentors and being spiritual leaders and and guiding us, because not everybody in the millennial generation, they're not like that. They don't do that, which I'm thankful you do. But I would definitely say that because I think that's part of it. We want to jump Gen Z. We want to pursue Jesus, but we don't have a leader to ask questions and ask the hard questions. Because sometimes if you go to certain churches, I'm not saying Northside's like this, but other churches, you go to them and you ask a certain question. It's like, where'd you come up with that? Like that's awful. But it's just a question they have. Figuring if you don't have an answer, tell them you'll study and figure it out. And that's what we need, in previous generations, because we're not going to look towards we're not going to look towards our generation for teaching. We're going to look towards older people. And we need that, especially because if the want is growing, we need more teachers, So.
All right.
Yeah.
So, this is just a random question, but it just came to my mind.
Okay.
I know you're passionate about media.
Yeah.
Right. Social media or anything, a lot of media kind of
Right. Yeah.
Aspects of things. So how can we use social media as a whole to glorify God?
That's good. That's really, really good. The same way that, you see all these worldly things, we can do the same exact thing but better. Whether if it's, again, posting those clips from college campuses as a word of encouragement or, doing a podcast, for example, or whatever. And that's easy, that's so easy now. It's free. I'm doing this for free right now, off an app. And so, as long as you go in it with the right intentions of how you're going to create content, because I'll be honest, it's a grind. To try to sit there and, schedule people and all that. Again, be accustomed to changing plans, because this episode wasn't going to happen, but, it did. So, and that'll happen. But, we can definitely use social media in an even better way. The devil will use it, but God can use it too. That's what we have to realize is that, even with all the, crude, nasty stuff too, there's also this side that God wants to use it, and, use it for his kingdom. And, we have to remember too, that it's not about the likes and stuff. And, sometimes I do get, and I'll just be honest, getting fixated on the numbers and stats, partly because, something that like me and this other person, we sat down and did, like it's our conversation. And so I'm like, come on, God, push their conversation. It was so good. I loved it, get it out to more people. And, there is an aspect of, if somebody shares an episode or whatever, it goes further. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but also you got to pray that God brings it to the right people. But for sure, we can definitely use media in many aspects. Northside uses it all the time, right?
Yeah.
You have to post other events and stuff, and I'm sure we'll use it tonight. Like, hey, we got Wednesday night, So, it's the same way that the world uses it, we can use it better for sure. Yeah.
So thinking about your podcast now, Young Minds Podcast.
Yeah, yep.
I remember when you were first talking about the idea of Young Minds Podcast.
that feels like that feels so long ago.
Yeah, man. And you just praying through it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you. It started then. I remember that. But so why did you start Young Minds Podcast?
Well, one thing, and I've said this before, is that I used to do, believe it or not, and you ain't got to go digging this up. I used to do, TikTok a long time ago. And it was like in 2020, right? So everybody was bored out of their mind.
Yeah.
locked in their homes, because of COVID. And then I met this guy. His name was Cody Truitt, and he was a military guy, and he reached out to me because I was trying to do a video for our commander in the Vice Police Department, because I know him. He was going to get promoted to commander. And I said, I want to get a bunch of my TikTok people, and we're going to congratulate him, just as a nice little thing. And I wasn't going to do it. And then, and then he reaches out to me. He's like, are you still doing this? I said, I'll do it now, because it's a man in uniform. Like, I'm doing this now. And so, we reached out, he did it, and that was I thought it was going to be the extent. Well, then I saw where he was doing a podcast of his own. I was like, man, that'd be, and I was just recently saved after he did that, and I said, that'd be fun. I want to do that. Or at least talk to him about it. And so, I was on his podcast. I was the first guest he had on. And then I was like, and then I started meeting more and more of these podcasters, Donovan Jones and Antoine McGee, there are a few more. And, there was this little Christian community of podcasters that I was starting to, meet up with. Didn't have mine yet. But then, but then I noticed something. I was like, okay, all these podcasters, they're mainly for adults. Where's the youth at? Where's the young people's podcast at? And so I was like, well, God, are you trying to tell me that this is the gap I need to fill? And so it wasn't long. And then I was like, I kept feeling the urge to start to push it and, keep going. And so I did. And look where it's at now. I remember sitting there in that first episode. I took a chair from the dining room table, put it in my room, put my phone on my dresser, and started talking into it for 15 minutes. Did a really bad version of my testimony. It was, I won't lie, it was awful. So that's why I'm doing an updated one in May, but still, but I mean, that was the start. November 3rd I think it was a Thursday.
Okay.
2022 is when I started it. Put the first 10 episodes out in 2022, and I started in 2023, my first full year. And it's been crazy. Dude. Yeah. I mean, and some people they ask me well, what if you're because I've had this asked before, what if Northside putting Young Minds as their official podcast or whatever. And that'd be great. That'd be cool. But also at the same time, I think it would limit me to what the people I could interview, because I've interviewed people from, across Point, Crossroads, other churches too, and just people that I know that are Christians, from around our community. So that's been really cool to bring our community together under one umbrella. As of course, there's a lot of Northsiders, of course, but there's a lot of different people too. And there's even a few people that, I won't lie, I had some reservations about, God, is this really who you want me to interview next? But then I did, and oh my gosh, their stories were crazy. I had somebody actually talk to me about an episode that was like that, or it wasn't about their episode, but it was about the person. And I was like, well, dude, go back and listen to their interview, and you'll change your mind about them. Because sure, they may not do everything perfectly on their social medias or nothing. I don't either. We judge them, but look what we're doing every day. It's nothing better than what they're doing. And he had a story, and he told it, and I was like, man, that was so good. And I just had instances like that, and also just the honor of getting to interview people John and Tammy Eunice, getting their story. That was a big one, just because of how impactful their story's already gone. And literally that day when they came to talk to me, they'd already talked to the Valdosta football team about that as well. So they just told the story twice in one day. But they don't get tired of it, and that's the same thing with everybody. They're so willing to do it, which I appreciate. I rarely have people that go, nah, I just don't want, it's not my thing. But even then, I've had people say that when they come around. Like Dave Thomas, for example. He just didn't think, he said he didn't have a story. I'm like, hold on now. You cannot be telling me you are in a wheelchair, my man. You did not just end up like that. All right.
Yeah, Dave's great.
You've got a story somewhere. And so he eventually came around, and his story blew up, and in my head it did, and it was great, and since then, I've been able to expand it even more. Got hats, we got a website now, shirts, hoodies now, things like that, and that's been really beneficial just to see that.
Awesome. So I got two questions now, just to go kind of a little bit deeper into your podcast. Number one, how has this podcast glorified God? And number two, how has it helped other people?
So glorified God, I would definitely say, and that might be a part of, it's glorified God in the testimonies that people have given. But also, I want to probably even more so, and I do want to end this off with prayer at the end, because that's one thing I've told you that I want to work on in my episodes to show that. Yeah. And because, I mean, I've gone 100+ episodes, and it's been in the back of my head, but I just forget about it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I should have done that,
Yeah.
you know? So it has glorified God in many ways through the podcast, and also just with conversations we've had, and, you know, encouragement, not just for me, but others. I've heard, you know, I've seen the comments. But, you know, so many times that people will say something, and I'm like, you know, I don't know if you knew this, but that was for me, by the way. You know? So that's been really neat. But definitely, I think I could get even better at that. You know, I mean, because you can improve that in any way, in anything that you do. But in terms of how it's helped other people, you know, I can't say directly, you know, but I mean, I know it has. I've just seen the encouragement and the comments that people have left. And, you know, the places it's gone to, there's no telling I mean, it's gone to like 21 different countries. And I don't know how you can understand me, but hey, if you can, great. And so, you know, I just pray that it's helped people, because I mean, I can't see the direct, like, you know, number of people that listen. I mean, I could see like maybe a year's worth or whatever, but the stats are very limited, you know, unless you tell me or you word of mouth or whatever. I'm not real sure, which honestly, I kind of prefer that, because then I'm under the true impact until we get to heaven. Like, what's podcasted? You know, people overseas might be getting saved from it, and I have no idea.
Sure.
You know, and you know, and
But
that
God
might be
does.
how people
But God does.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
God does. Exactly, and that's all that needs to know. You know, so in terms of it helping people, I'm sure it has, but but verbally, I've not like gotten like a confirmation. Like, oh my gosh, like I was about, you know, on the verge of this, and like. But I've gotten so many encouraging words from, you know, people talking about like, this story was amazing, all this, you know. And what's really neat too is that it's giving people just an outlet. You know, they wouldn't otherwise have one to, you know, tell their story on. Like Tina Evans, she told her whole testimony, the whole thing. And, you know, it was actually good that she was the one that I was interviewing that week, because I was sick as a dog. And so I didn't want to talk. I was like, you know, and so she talked, and, you know, I just kind of did a few, that's wow, you know, kind of just, you know, did a few of those. But now she directs people to that episode every time she wants to, you know, somebody to tell her testimony. And that's neat. You know, people are using that as a resource. You know, to help them tell their story, because sometimes people ask you all the time, oh, what's your testimony? I'm like, go here. It's like, you know, go here. You know, because you might not have time to tell everything. So yeah, that's definitely for sure.
Yeah, well, I know it's helped a lot of people. You know, what you're doing, and certainly glorifying God through that. So that's awesome, man. Yeah. So from here, you've been, what has it been, 2 years that you've started the
almost 3.
Almost 3 years since you've started.
It'll be 3 in November. Oh no.
It'll be 3 years in November.
It'll be 3 in November. Yeah. It'll be 3 years in November.
Yeah.
I'm not like so far ahead, because I was like thinking of like 4 years what I could do for it the other day. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I'll add too, is that my brain, and you know this, is constantly going. Like in terms of like, who am I going to have next, and praying through that, and like, you know, right now we're recording this in April, but like I'm started episodes in May already, like for that. And just keeping that going. Reason being, if you ever want to start your own podcast, is because you want consistency, you know. And also, if you get sick, trips, or hurricanes in our case, you know, so 2 hurricanes. You know, one comes out every week, or however much you want to do. Now, I wouldn't do any more than a week, because, you know, or do like some people do 2 in a week or whatever. I wouldn't do that, because you'd have to pump out more episodes, and you don't want to get burned out, you know. And it's important to take breaks. You know, that's one thing I'll take breaks. If you've got a bunch saved up and recorded, take a month break. Do it. It's beneficial. But in terms of where the podcast goes from here, you know, just keep going. But I, you know, want to see continuous growth, of course. Maybe get some more people onto the website, you know, and getting the merchandise. Reason being is because if I could do this full time, I would. You know, that'd be the dream right there, is to do that full time and continue to hear testimonies of what, you know, God's done in people's lives. Right now, it's just a hobby. But if people want to go check out the website, it's www.theyoungmanspodcast.com.
Okay.
And, you know, of course, all the links will be down there too. But, you know, and so doing that, of course, and also just, you know, the type of people that, you know, I've interviewed. It's like, you know, one thing that I've tried to start doing is kind of expanding a little bit out in the community a bit more, like other pastors and things like that. You know, just so that way I can, like, I've slowly started doing that with I interviewed Jason Spell over in Lake Park. He's the youth pastor over there. And so that was really neat to go and hear, you know, 'cause he's got a different perspective than what, say, our youth pastor has, you know, and it may not be like a wrong one. It's just a different perspective.
Sure.
And it's really cool to hear that. You know, but now this is more of I'm praying through it, but there's also like a want. Okay. I'd love to, you know, interview people like Phil Wickham and stuff. I'd love to, you know, one day, and that'd be a big, you know, thing. And people may
Shout out
go,
to Phil Wilkins.
please, come on, please. You know, and people may be like, well, you just want to do that because like he's a big celebrity, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a part, yes, but also it's because I want to know like what makes him tick behind being on stage and all that. What keeps you humble? Like, you know what, there's all those things that go through my head because I went and saw him one time and, you know, sure. He's very godly. You can tell it. I mean, he's reading scripture off a stage, on the stage, but, you know, still what makes you tick? I mean, because you know, you've got to have the quiet moments. You can't just be jumping around on stage all the time. All right. You know, and so it's things like that, I mean, and there's a part of me too, that if that happens, more of Northside and Valdosta's people's stories can get out, you know, because if you, you know, show it to Phil Wickham's audience or whoever's audience it is, they might go dig into other episodes and find, you know, yours or somebody else's. And they're like, man, these are really good, you know, this is really good testimonies or whatever. You know, so that's part of it is, you know, growing the audience. So that way more people's stories can be heard. Cause there's some great ones, you know, they just on social media. And so, you know, it's up to me to share it. And I don't have the biggest social media presence. Yeah. You know, I can scream at the top of my lungs all I want, but and he's like, hey, look at this episode. But some people it's like, come on, you know.
I'm listening, Charlie. I'm listening.
Yeah, you know, but that's kind of where I'm praying that it goes from here. You know, as we keep going. Also that, you know, for continuous guests, you know, and consistency. Like, because I feel like every single year, and this has been the hardest year, honestly. It gets harder and harder to keep that up. Like, because I mean, I've noticed that my recordings, like, it's not slowed down, but like from like last year and the year before, it slowed down, and I'm like, I don't like it. I don't like that because it, you know, that gives me a little bit of anxiety, and I've got to watch that because the devil will try to creep in and be like, oh, you can put it off a week. No, I can't. Like, you know, you know, and so for sure, like, so we just be praying for that, you know, for continuous consistency, and also just for new guests too, because I mean. I'm gonna run out of people in Valdosta eventually. I mean, you know, you know, there's a lot of great people, but I've got to start finding some other people too. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So you may have already answered some of this, but I did want to ask specifically. So, you've been almost 3 years in the Young Minds podcast. Yeah. Where would you like for it to go from here? But think about maybe 5, 10, 20 plus years from now. I mean, you know, I know that's a loaded question, but take it where you want. I
mean, what I would love for it to do is have like a studio or what, like, you know, like a Joe Rogan type, like, you know, just, I mean, but a clean version of him, you know, and like, you know, to have that, you know, good camera, like, and from one thing, putting them on camera and filming them, you know, because that's one thing that, and I do believe I will be able to move in that step in the next maybe couple years. It's just going to take time and research because I don't want to spend all my money and be like, well, that was a dumb product to get, you know. But I would love to have a studio of some kind, you know, and like if that's where God leads, He'll provide that. But you know, like Gavin McCracken, he's been a big help in showing me, like, you know, you might want to, like, this is the camera or whatever, and we're gonna actually practice a little bit of that. And that episode I was mentioning on my testimony, like, we're gonna film that, and you know, that's kind of where I would, because one thing's for sure, like, podcasts are growing. Like I hopped on the bandwagon a bit, you know, before everybody else did. But I've seen about 2 or 3 pop up in the last couple of months, and I've already asked if I could be on those too. But you know, I mean, they're growing, but the thing about it is, videos are always getting more than just audios. That's just facts. You know, because they want to be able to see the conversation, they want to be able to see the person. And I try, and I know that as a fact. So I put, like, on the graphics, I put the people on there, but that's not enough. They want to see the conversation like this. They, you know, they'd want a camera in the window right here, and they'd want to see it. And so I would say that's the next step. You know, I mean, and that's probably sooner rather than later. But in terms of like 5-10 years or so, I'd love to have my own place for that. Yeah, you know, even if it's like a man cave or whatever it looks like. Okay. You know, or you know, and I would just continue to pray on that because that'd be like so fun. Like and I would, you know, it would show also, and it's not that I'm not serious about it, but it show even people even more that I'm serious about this thing, and that that what we're doing is for the God's kingdom, and it's for nothing else.
Yeah.
But also too, I want people to enjoy them.
Yeah.
So if that means trying to figure out new ways for audio or whatever, so be it. I'll have to do that. And man, that's one thing that I've had to dig into. I didn't know I'd be having to dig into it so much. It's like different ways to record and different microphones, different this and that. I mean, because it's changed since, I think you've done it all 3 different ways that I've recorded. I think you've done it I had it sitting on just on my phone on the desk. I think you've done it with a big microphone and you did it with these.
Yeah.
And so it's changed in all 3 different ways.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's good though, because it shows the growth of, of just my knowledge too. Because I've had to ask so many people. I'm like, what do I do here?
Yeah.
I have no idea. But still, I would definitely say that that's where I want it to go in the next 5, 10, and I'm not even joking. They were joking somewhat, but I'm like, have you ever thought about retiring from it? I can't retire from it. I'm not making money off of it. I don't know how that works. I'm like, you got to be making
time
money.
Time to hang up the hat.
All right, so already hanging it up. No, I can't even make money off it yet. Already hanging it up. But yeah, I was for sure, that's the dream, is to have, especially if I had that studio per se, it would show that some of these bigger artists or whatever, man, he's got a place I could go to and it's and all that. And it would show them that I'm legit. Of course, everybody at Northside knows, but some people may not take me seriously if, because they've got to see more or whatever. And I just think it'd be beneficial just in the technical aspect, just having a camera and all that. And, and again, this is not the main reason why I would do it, but it'd be nice to make some income off of it. Just, and I just want to preface that is not the main reason why I do it. But just because there's a lot of work involved in it, and there's a lot of things that, there's a lot of times where I'm, sacrificing other things to do something like this. And so that's just something that I'd want people to realize, but no, that is not the main reason why I do them at all. And I've been doing that for 3 years straight almost, and I've not gotten much money off of it. So now one thing that I will say that's a blessing, and I'll, let you pray us out, is that, with those t-shirts, for example, it sent me and my mom to Savannah. We raised $1,000 just because of those t-shirts. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, what? I mean,
wow.
That was, that's, I mean, and my mom was like, well, if it wasn't, for God and your business skills, we wouldn't be going on this trip. I said, well, I guess I got the salesman blood from my uncle. He sells things, so I guess where I got that from.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's where I want it to go.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
yeah,
I really enjoyed talking today, and I definitely want to pray for you.
Thank you.
As we kind of close our time together, but yeah. Well, let me go ahead and pray for you, and we'll go from there. How about that?
All right, sounds good.
Lord, I just pray right now just for Charlie. I'm thankful for him, God. I pray that you bless him, and I pray that you would bless this podcast, God, that ultimately it would glorify you, and ultimately you would be pleased from it. And Father, I pray that it would impact the world for Christ, Father. And I pray for just much impact in that way, Father. I do pray. Thank you for this time that you've given us. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for Charlie and Father, what you're doing in his life, God. And I'm thankful, Lord, most of all, that you saved him. And God, that you're working in a mighty way through him and using him for your glory and for your honor, Father. We love you so much, and we give you all the glory and the honor and the praise, God, because you are worthy of all worship. And we love you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
That was kind of a spur of the moment thing. But things happen, right?
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, and
absolutely.
This is this is your third time being on now. So,
yeah, I enjoyed it, man.
I was going to tell you this: we got to get you back on 2 more times, and you'll be considered a podcast regular. That's like a new thing I've got started now.
Okay. What is it? 5 times?
Yeah,
okay.
5 times. So
Oh,
after
wow.
after you've been on 5 times, you'll get your own playlist on the YouTube channel. you know?
Wow.
So we got to get that rolling and see what we can do. Maybe
Okay.
for a deep dive or something. But
Yeah. Be happy to do it.
yeah, well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it,
Yeah.
and I can't wait to see what God does with it.
Absolutely.
With another episode of the Young Minds Podcast coming to a close, I just want to remind you that you are never alone and faith is action. So let's get out there.